than they found it. And so thanks for that. Because it is Career Week, we get the opportunity to have one of the best, I think, guys in the world that talks about really the blue-collar career, but is a big advocate for the white-collar career. The great, the one, the only Mike Rowe in the house. Such an honor to have him here. And we latched on one more guest, and so Mike and I are going to sit down for a good bit, but then we're going to have about 5 minutes. We've asked them to stay after he was here for yesterday's Convo Select, which was a packed house with our School of Business, to give us about 5 minutes of a thought. And it's so awesome to have James Bearden with us. James is the executive producer for the single most successful radio broadcast in broadcast history, the one, the only, Rush Limbaugh show, all right? So the man, the myth, behind the curtain is right there. So he'll give us about 5 minutes of just thought before we dismiss this morning. But let's just get right to it. Let's watch this about Mike Rowe.
You know him from his show Dirty Jobs, but Mike Rowe is much more than a TV host.
The dirtiest man on television. You've heard him too. He's the narrator for shows like Deadliest Catch and American Chopper.
My role on the show is pretty simple. I'm an apprentice, and I work with the people who actually do the jobs, and my responsibilities are to simply try and keep up and give an honest account of what it's like to be these people for one day in their life.
If I see a shark, start screaming something like, "Shark," and then chaos will ensue, tagging will occur, research will unfold before our very eyes.
On this episode of Ghost Hunters International.
Somebody's got to do it.
With Arctic storm Elsa raging just 200 miles to the northeast.
Mike Rowe, the founder of Mike Rowe Works Foundation, is here helping to spread the word about skilled trades. He's granted over $5 million to help over 1,000 students pursue a technical or vocational education.
Such an honor to have you here.
So great to be here.
So, Mike, we're going to talk about Shark Week that you've been the narrator and the host of. A lot of our kids, they love Shark Week. Matter of fact, a lot of our guys, they wait until Shark Week before they actually ask out a girl. All right, so for what it's worth, we'll get into that.
What is that worth exactly?
Well, you want to get into it now?
No, I don't.
Okay.
We'll wait.
A lot of these guys, they feel like, they're an apex predator, and Shark Week is their one chance to go, "Hey, girl." And so it's not working out, but they try anyway. All right, so
always
we'll talk
keep
about
your
that.
chum with you, gentlemen.
That's right.
And swim with a buddy.
They should be asking girls out when they watch Dirty Jobs. Honestly, that's what they ought to be doing. But we also have you hosting that. You've been in so many different things. We'll get into all that. But right off the bat, just to give you a little bit of history about your upbringing, and before everyone knew you as this great celebrity, how you got to this place. It's interesting that people know you as a very trusted individual, as kind of the voice for the everyday man in one sense. And every time I hear someone give you a compliment, Forbes magazine called you one of the top 10 most trusted celebrities in the world. Every time that's given to you, you defer it to your father and your grandfather. You always say it's really the heritage and the legacy that you grew up with. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing, and tell us a little bit about the influence of your dad and your granddad.
Well, it's just because I'm incredibly modest, you see.
Yes.
Yeah, look, I was very, very fortunate. I grew up with loving parents, still married now, 58 years, but even more lucky for me were my neighbors. My neighbors were Carl and Thelma Noble. They were my grandparents. My granddad, we were talking earlier, is some of you may know him, not by name, but when I tell you the kind of guy he was, he only went to the 7th grade, but by the time he was 30, he was a master electrician, a steam fitter, he was a pipe fitter, he's a mechanic, he was a welder. He built the house that I was born in without a blueprint, right? He was that guy. And, he and his wife were married 75 years. My parents were married. I had basically 2 sets of parents growing up in a weirdly isolated part of Baltimore County. We had about 50 acres of woods behind us, and it was just a great place to grow up, and I had great examples of men and women in my life from the very beginning. So I got good cards, you know, and I'll never forget that, because where in the world would you be without it?
In 2012, the Boy Scouts of America gave you their most distinguished award, and I know that's a big part of your upbringing as well, not just good family, but you grew up as the Boy Scouts having really a big influence on you. Talk about that for just a minute. Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, I had good cards, but I also had challenges. I stuttered as a kid, really up until I was about 15 or 16 years old. And part of the thing that my dad wanted to do to get me out of my shell was just expose me to other kids. And while the place I grew up in was kind of idyllic, it was also really isolated. So my parents got concerned, and they thought maybe, you know, I was going to be sort of backward and broken and everything. So they literally drove me to the church. The Boy Scouts met in the basement. They drove me in the old station wagon, you know, with the real lumber on the side, you know, that thing. And basically didn't even slow down. He just kind of pushed me out, and I rolled into a Boy Scout meeting. And for 7 years, I got to look at the world in a way that I hadn't seen it before. You know, I didn't have our scoutmaster, we had two. The first was a retired cop, and the second one was a drill sergeant in the Marine Corps. And he ran the troop like he ran his troops. It was discipline. We had a boxing ring, right, where we settled our differences. I mean, it was I don't know what's going on in the Boy Scouts today necessarily, but I can tell you back in 1975 in the basement of Kenwood United Presbyterian Church, it was not a safe place. You know? I mean, I learned to shoot in the Boy Scouts, arrows and guns. I learned first aid. I learned how to box. I learned stuff that I'm not even sure it's okay to talk about, you know, anymore. But we had a ball, and looking back on it, you know, you don't always realize the moments in your life that are truly transformational. But those times, at that point in my life, I saw what I needed to see and got exposed to some things that I needed to know about, and I wouldn't be here today without them.
So one of the great things about the way you were brought up was your parents didn't overprotect, helicopter parent, right? They actually let you into environments where you didn't just grow a physical immune system, but an emotional one as well. And talk to us about when you were in high school, how there was a sign over your counselor's desk that bothered you. I think it said, work smart, not hard.
Yeah, I mean, today, thanks to Dirty Jobs, I have a foundation, and the foundation that we saw focuses primarily on challenging bad advice. You know, so I talk a lot about some of the worst advice I'd ever seen. And I had a guidance counselor in high school. His name was Mr. Dunbar. And I was a senior, so this would have been 1979. And I was trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. I truly had no idea what that might be. Not only did I not know what I wanted to do, we didn't have any money growing up, you know. And so in the back of my mind, I figured I'd go to a community college for a couple of years to sort it out. Well, I took some tests when I was in school, and I guess I did well enough on them because Mr. Dunbar called me down to have a chat about my future. And he said, look, based on your test scores and what I know of you, you should go to, it was William and Mary, it was University of Maryland, and the University of Pennsylvania. So 3 great schools. Terrific schools, right? And he made his case for the schools, and I said, look, the thing is, Mr. Dunbar, I don't really know what I want to do, and I don't really have a ton of money, so I think, you know, at $26 a credit, I'm going to go over to the community college for a while. I'm going to try some new things, learn some things. He said, no, Mike, that'd be a huge mistake. That'd be beneath your potential, were his exact words. And then he pointed to this poster that was hanging on the wall, and the poster had a picture of a college graduate holding a degree, standing next to that was literally it. And, you know, you can see the guy on the right is kind of in a dirty, dingy environment holding a wrench. And the guy on the left is optimistic. He's got his whole life in front of him because he's got his degree. And then he did 2 things. He pointed to the caption, which made absolutely no sense to me. If you Google work smart, not hard, don't do it now, but if you do it at some point, you'll see page after page after page. It's become a bromide, right? A platitude. We believe that. But what he said that really just chapped me was, you know, which one of these guys do you want to be? Now, the guy on the right was basically my grandfather, the guy I just described, the guy who could build a house without a blueprint, the guy who was heroic to me. And I just couldn't believe what I was looking at. That poster, by the way, was part of a PR campaign for college in the late 70s. In those days, we needed more people to go to college. You know, there just wasn't enough higher education happening in the country. The problem that happened in the country was that we started to promote college, or one form of education, at the expense of all the others. So I know it's career week here. I know there are a lot of things you can do with the rest of your life, but back in 1979, we were telling high school graduates that if you didn't get a degree, you'd wind up doing something beneath you. And that always bothered me, you know? And that's why Dirty Jobs became the show it became. It was a tribute to my grandfather. That's why the foundation exists today. And that's why work smart, not hard is maybe the worst advice in the world. I remember thinking at the time, I wanted to lean across the table and take a Sharpie and cross out, you know, the word not and write the word and. And while I was leaning over, I wanted to smack Mr. Dunbar right in the head. So actually, we did that.
There it is.
We did that exact thing. And last year, that's me, by the way, holding my college degree. You can't see, but I'm not wearing any pants underneath my... It's a metaphorical thing, I think. But the guy on the right is my cameraman. His name's Taylor Wooten, been with me for years. And he represents, in this photo, a guy with no college debt, a job that pays about $90,000 a year, whereas I represent a guy who got his credentials but didn't really get trained for a job that actually existed and now enjoys $90,000 worth of debt and no specific opportunity. So, all of that's a long way of saying education is hugely important, but there are a lot of ways to get the education and the training and the competency that you need. And my life today is spent largely talking about those alternatives.
Yeah, and one of the reasons we invited you to this particular week is because people maybe at first glance see that and think, oh, wow, that poster had the opposite effect and made you like the voice and the face of the blue-collar man against the white-collar man, but you've been so vocal for the college education, for the white-collar man. You're just a big voice for, if you begin college, finish and get your degree. You're just a big voice of diversify your portfolio. Here at Liberty, we have trade job opportunities. As a matter of fact, your foundation scholarships several of our students, where some of our students can become welders and plumbers and electricians, and they can work on engines with 1-year degree and walk into a 6-figure job. But a lot of our students diversify it. They take welding and engineering so that their resume goes to the top of the stack. So talk to us about the balance of that and why you're not pushing against the education, but you're saying debt can become an investment into your future if it's done right. You have such a balanced view of that.
Well, if you look at a quarter, you know, it's got heads and it's got tails. You know, it's got two sides of the same coin. It makes no sense to talk only about one side, but that's kind of what's happening in our country today. Everything is binary. Everything is this or that. You know, it's blue collar or white collar, smart or stupid, good or bad, right or wrong. We've lost the shades of gray. And so I spend a lot of time trying to make the point that a balanced workforce, you know, requires a healthy number of tradespeople and a healthy number of, you know, all kinds of different things. So, look, for me, my college experience was invaluable. 3 years at a community college, a little bit of work, then a couple years at a university. And when the dust settled, it was 1985, and I had paid, what, 12 grand for the whole works. Today, the whole works is, well, you guys know, it's like $100,000. Same exact thing. So that doesn't mean college is any worse or any better than it's ever been. It simply means it's more expensive. And so to manage that properly and to be aware of it as you go, and like you say, to pick up some useful skills along the way so that when you graduate, you know, 50% of people who graduate don't find work in their chosen field. They have to adapt. They have to figure out something else to do. That's a big lesson. And the sooner you learn it, I think the better off every individual will be, and the better off our country will be.
The numbers don't lie. I mean, the person with the undergrad degree, makes $1,100 on average per week. The person without one in the entry-level work gets $750 per week. The person, by the way, with a master's degree makes $1,400. The person in the unemployment rates, the person with the degree is far more likely to hold their job when the economy tanks than someone else. And then there's all the other things that that you can do in buying stock in yourself by furthering your education. And so people with a degree typically also have benefits. They have medical benefits, they have retirement. People without a degree typically are less prone to have that. So what is the balance? I mean, you're such a voice for both, but be wise as a serpent, gentle as a dove in the way you do it. What advice would you give someone who's here? Obviously, you got a room full of college students, and we brought you here for this moment, and is trying to figure out, like, at what point does this degree really begin to pay off? Like, you can't just be a lawyer without a degree.
That's
But you
true.
can be a songwriter without one.
Sure.
So why would someone take a political science degree or get a talk to us about the balance of that, because you have such a great, unique perspective.
Well, if you're at the doctor's office and he recommends some sort of procedure, or